Have you ever wondered why your children don't call as often these days? It's not that anything serious happened. No arguments, no big fallouts. They just seem distant. You visit, they still offer you a meal, still smile, still talk, but your heart feels cold. Sometimes you sit there for hours, feeling like a stranger in the very home you helped build. You tell a story, they barely respond. You offer advice, they brush it off. And deep down, even if no one says it aloud, you can feel it. You're slowly becoming an outsider in your own family. It's not a pleasant feeling. But instead of blaming your children, have you ever stopped and asked yourself, have I spent so long living for others that I've forgotten to live for myself? This video isn't here to point fingers. It's here to tell you a truth most people are afraid to say. Sometimes giving too much makes others stop appreciating you. And here's the surprising part. You can absolutely regain their respect, love, and even your own joy, just by making a few simple changes. So if you've ever felt like you're fading in the eyes of your children or grandchildren, then this video is for you. And if anything in these words strikes a chord in your heart, hit subscribe so you never miss a video that helps you live fully, especially after 60. 1. Stop trying so hard to please your children. I know it may sound hard to believe, but it's true. The more you try to please your children, the more they lose respect for you. Painful, isn't it? But many parents never realize this until it's too late. I once met a woman named Linda in her 70s. She was what everyone would call the perfect mom, always available when her children needed her, always said, "Sure, no problem," even when she was tired. She even used her retirement savings to help pay off her son's debt, without ever asking for it back. But one day, she slipped and fell in her kitchen. No one came. She called her children. One replied, "I'm busy. I'll call you back later." Lying there on the floor, she told me she kept thinking, "What did I do wrong?" And then it hit her. Maybe I gave too much, to the point where my kids assumed I didn't need care myself. You see, people, including your own children, only value what has boundaries. If you're always saying yes, always putting your needs aside, always available without thanks, over time, your presence becomes expected, not appreciated. It's not that they don't love you, it's that you've silently taught them you don't need to be prioritized, and that's the first thing that needs to change. Because if you don't respect yourself, no one else will either. Have you ever been in a situation like Linda's? If so, please share your story in the comments, because your words might help someone else feel a little less alone today. 2. The more you argue, the more you lose. Here's a tough truth. The harder you try to be heard, the more they tune you out. Sound familiar? Many older parents have told me that when they give advice, their kids snap back. Things are different now. Stop trying to control everything. So you raise your voice, repeat yourself, bring up the past to prove your point. But the more you talk, the heavier the silence gets. And when you finally go quiet from exhaustion, they accuse you of sulking. I knew a man, Uncle Frank, a respected teacher for decades. Students admired him. But at home, his adult children dismissed him, talked over him, acted like he knew nothing. At first, he argued back. Every time, result? Tension at the table, colder relationships. Then one day, he stopped arguing. He didn't initiate conflict. He spoke calmly. He only continued when treated with respect. Suddenly, his kids started listening. not because he shouted louder, but because he stopped playing the same old game. They no longer saw him as a grumpy old man, but as someone who knew his worth and didn't need to fight for it. What about you? Have you ever felt the more you speak, the more distant your children become? Share your thoughts below. Sometimes a small shift in how you talk can save a relationship. 3. You don't need your children to feel whole. This may come as a shock, but it's true. You don't need your children to feel happy. It sounds strange, but it's the secret to earning their respect. We spend our whole lives living for our kids, and that's beautiful. But when they grow up and build their own families, we often hold on to the habit of waiting. Waiting for a call, waiting for an invitation, waiting to be needed. And when that doesn't happen, the loneliness creeps in. I met a woman named Helen. She called her kids constantly, checking in, giving reminders, offering help. But the more she reached out, the more distant they became. Until one day, she stopped. She put her phone away, she signed up for dance classes, joined a painting group, went on short trips with old friends. And guess what? Just a few weeks later, her kids called, "Mom, where have you been? You've been so busy we can't even get a hold of you." When you stop clinging, you become more magnetic. When you have a life of your own, your children don't just feel obligated to call, they're interested. So what about you? If there were one thing you'd like to do for yourself again, something just for you, what would it be? I'd love to hear your answer in the comments. 4. When you give too much, it becomes an obligation. I used to think I was being a good father because I was always there when my kids needed help. No need to ask twice, no need for thanks. Whenever I heard, "Dad, can you?" I showed up. When they moved, I brought my truck. When they were tired, I watched the grandkids, even if I had a doctor's appointment. When they were short on cash, I dipped into my retirement savings. Then one day, I had a minor surgery. Nothing major, but I needed someone to drive me home. I called. One said they had a meeting. The other said, "I'll stop by this weekend." So I walked out of the hospital alone, medicine bag in hand, and I laughed quietly to myself. Right then, I realized I taught my kids that I'd always be there, but I never taught them that I might need care too. That was the day I changed. I still help, but I'm no longer the first to say yes without question. Now I say, "I have other plans that day, let me check." Or, "I'll help, but you'll need to handle the rest." At first, they seemed surprised. But then something I didn't expect happened. They began to check in more. They said, "Thank you more." It turns out, when people feel your absence, they learn to value your presence. Are you giving and not being appreciated? Try stepping back a little, just enough to remind them your help is a choice, not a given. 5. Live for yourself, not just for your family. After I retired, I thought my only role was to support my family. Gardening, driving the grandkids, making dinner when the kids were busy. I didn't complain. I believed that's what a good father does. But one morning, I looked in the mirror and realized something. I hadn't done anything just for myself in years. I used to love playing the guitar. I once dreamed of road tripping through the western states. I had started writing stories for my grandkids, but never finished. I gave it all up to be available, to stay close to home just in case. Then I tried something small. Instead of turning on the TV every morning, I picked up my old guitar. I joined a local walking group once a week. Within a few months, I felt different, lighter, more alive. And guess what? My kids noticed. "Dad, you look great lately. What have you been doing?" That's when I realized, when I started living for myself again, I earned their respect in a whole new way. You don't need to sacrifice who you are just to be loved. Live a life that you find meaningful. People will feel that energy in you. What's one thing you've put aside just because you're a dad? Maybe now's the time to pick it back up. 6. Self-respect isn't something to negotiate. I used to think love meant letting little things slide, staying quiet, being the bigger person, especially with my children. But there were family dinners where I barely got a word in, conversations where I was interrupted mid-sentence, moments when I gave advice, only to be told, "Dad, this isn't the old days. Don't tell me how to raise my kids." I'd smile and let it go. But later that night, lying awake, I'd wonder, how is it that I'm respected everywhere else, but invisible in my own home? And then it hit me. If you don't draw the line, people will keep crossing it. So I changed, not how I loved them, but how I presented myself. If someone spoke to me disrespectfully, I didn't argue or shout. I simply said, "We'll continue this conversation when you're ready to speak respectfully." No anger, no drama, but very clear. And slowly, something shifted. My kids spoke more gently. The atmosphere became warmer, not because I forced them to change, but because I changed how I showed up. Are you letting people step over your boundaries without realizing it? Maybe it's time to say, "That's enough." 7. Love doesn't mean endlessly enduring. I used to believe that fatherly love was unconditional, that if I kept giving, my kids would notice and be grateful. But I've learned something the hard way. Love without limits often turns into being taken for granted. I used to help with everything: moving, fixing things, babysitting, wiring money in emergencies. I never said no because I thought, they need me. I'm the dad. But one day, I called just to chat, and my child said, "Dad, I'll call you back. I'm busy." That call never came, and that's when it hit me. I wasn't being cherished. I was being used, not intentionally, but because I never set limits. So I started saying no, gently but clearly. "Sorry, I've got plans with a friend. I can help, but when will you be able to pay it back?" I wasn't being cold. I was just done being constantly available. At first, they were surprised, but then they started saying thank you, started asking, "Are you okay, Dad?" You don't say no to punish others. You say no to remind yourself that you too deserve care. Closing. Growing older doesn't mean fading away. You don't need to shout to be heard, and you don't need to sacrifice endlessly to be loved. Start living for yourself again, even in small ways, and your children will begin to feel that shift. Respect will return, not because you demanded it, but because you showed you're worth it. If there's one thing to do today, let it be this: stand tall, speak your truth, and live a life you're proud of. Have you ever felt overlooked in your own family? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes one voice can help someone else feel less alone. And if this video touched something in you, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Turn on the notification bell too, because here, you'll always have a quiet place to feel heard, understood, and valued, just as you are.